everyone. Ghanaians have just returned from a highly contested and a controversial election marked by violence. But President Akufo-Addo, who is the incumbent, has been re-elected and certified by the EC as the next president of the Republic of Ghana. How has the EC performed during this election? How about the media? Have they been diligent in their duties? That's what we'll be discussing today. Stay tuned for this very important discussion. We'll be right back. I'm grateful to have three gentlemen to join me for this discussion. Joining me from the UK is Dr. Khalid, Assistant Professor Accounting and Finance Management from Sheffield University in the UK. And also here in the United States is someone who is not new to this platform, and he's in the person of John Taden. He is a political economist from the University of Dallas, Texas. And Richard is a Ghanaian businessman based in South Korea, and also, let me say this one, a member of the NPP. So you are smiling. Well, gentlemen, welcome to the discussion.
That is okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you,
all right. So let me start with you. Let me see. Okay. Dr. Khalid, you were in Ghana, so you monitored the process. First of all, we've seen, yes, President Akufo-Addo has been re-elected as the next president of the Republic of Ghana. Your initial assessment of the polls in general?
Well, I mean, when the polling opened in the morning, I felt it was very smooth because, I mean, it was unlike previous elections where you start having verification machines malfunctioning and people in long queues. But on average, it was an exercise that had a time span of about 3 to 7 minutes per individual. And I think that really went rather very smooth. It came to the results trickling in. I think that was where there was a bit of opaqueness. Would I say a big much of it? Because unlike previous elections where we all knew where the results came from, this time around it was very tight. Just media houses were reporting different figures as to where they were coming from. Nobody knew. You know, the usual EC strong room characteristics that came with it, which gave a certain level of openness to the process, was missing in this particular election. But I thought that modernity would have really opened that up as well. So I think that's where the credibility of the election began to be questioned.
All right.
And I think that where we have gotten to as a democracy, I cringe when I see military men at polling stations, and I think we have to move beyond those.
We'll go into those details about, I mean, the media's performance, the military, police station, the report that we've had. But again, will you want to attribute the success, story of not having long queues at the polling centers to the creation of the new region? So, it gave more room or we had more polling stations than before.
Yeah, could be. They're varied. There are myriad of factors that played out here, right? It's 4 years is enough for any institution to improve upon its efficiency and efficacies, right? So I think that it gave the EC enough time. Again, there was justification of spending to create a new register and to get new machines or procure new machines and the likes of that. So I think that comes with time, right? But generally, as I said, a lot has gone into this election, given our thriving democracy and where we've gotten to. That raises questions and doubts that might be worrisome for the investor community and might be worrisome for the international community as well.
John, you have been watching from afar here in the United States with me because we are both stuck here in the United States, and especially when we've been deprived of voting as citizens abroad. ROPA was not, road. And so from afar, what you've seen in the media, what's your first thought about the elections?
The Electoral Commission, I think, has performed in a way that if you want to try to find out what is actually happening right now in terms of all the tension, the problems we're having, you would realize it's much more an internal human resource problem than equipment, machinery, or planning problem. The elections actually went on very smoothly, and I think that it is actually an achievement that people were able to vote within 3 minutes or sometimes no more than 5 minutes, and get out of the polling station. That's remarkable. The part where the Electoral Commission, I think, started to fail the people is when the media houses started to come out with figures, especially when these figures didn't tally with other media houses and did not tally even with what the political parties were announcing in their own press conferences. The political parties did hold a lot of press conferences to announce results and counter press conferences to challenge their opponents' results. Now, I'm not saying that the Electoral Commission should have come out to announce all the results. However, what they should have done was use their website to gradually update people on the results that were trickling in, so that for those of us who didn't like what we're seeing in terms of the multiple sources and numbers of results being announced, we would have some level of assurance from the Electoral Commission's website and say, well, we're just going to wait and see as the results come in. And that way, all of us can actually, in fact, be on the same page on the direction in which the election was moving. But they actually held on to the results until they had everything before they came out to tell us that they wanted to be certain of everything, which, as it turned out, in fact, when they announced the results, they did not have everything. And what they announced turned out to not be accurate. And one of the reasons why I said it probably is a human resource problem was you cannot be a big institution such as the Electoral Commission of Ghana and not have a quality assurance mechanism at every turn of the process, even up until the time that you announced the result. And so the Electoral Commission needed to at least double check the numbers that they were coming up with and make sure that they tallied, they corroborated with each other before making those announcements. And I think that
just to catch you before you go there, do you think that the EC was rushing to declare the result because it's giving itself some 24 hours to declare the results?
So they shot themselves in the foot. They tried to assure the people they would do it in 24 hours. It was fine when after 24 hours they said they wouldn't meet the deadline and asked for an extension. That was fine. What they should have done, however, is even if you had results for only one constituency so far, put it up there. It's not about the fact that they give themselves 24 hours. So this is what happened. If you look at the pressure that was mounting on them, everybody was like, the Electoral Commission is trying to change the results. They're trying to change the results because they're not updating or putting up anything on there. And then as soon as the Electoral Commission came out, announced the results, and then they didn't tally with what the media houses announced and what the political parties announced. And the Electoral Commission coming out a few hours later to say they made a mistake. These are the actual numbers. It gave people reason to actually confirm the suspicions that they had about the Electoral Commission.
Richard, you are probably smiling. I see on your status congratulating President Akufo-Addo, obviously because you're a member of the NPP. But without your political lenses, I want you to assess the election for me.
From me, from where I sit here in Asia, I would like to commend the Electoral Commission for doing such a wonderful work. In my opinion, for the first time in the history of Ghana, we have never experienced a pandemic of this nature before. We all know the magnitude, the impact of COVID-19. And for an electoral commission to hold elections in the middle of a pandemic is an unprecedented situation. And yet you look at the creation of new polling stations across the country, which for the first time made voting processes to be very easy and smooth. And we learned that there wasn't more than 750, electorate at each polling center. These are measures that were put in place despite the COVID-19. Then also there are issues of logistics that we have experienced in the past, where machines are breaking down, machines are getting frozen. This time we never witnessed anything of that sort. And so, in my opinion, whenever I see any other Ghanaian, for that matter, looking at the weaknesses of the Electoral Commission, looking at the things they couldn't get it right, it looks like Ghanaians are used to the way of doing things at the Electoral Commission. So that is the standard. Those are the indicators they are using to assess the current Jim Mensah led, Electoral Commission.
Richard, I want to find
Yeah,
out from you. Do you
yeah,
think that all that is coming out, especially the performance of the EC, is pardonable, especially churning out results? Nobody asked the EC to announce results. Yes, constitutionally we have a
yeah,
certain number of days, but the EC themselves came out and say, I'll announce the results in 24 hours. Nobody asked them to say that. How about that?
yeah. I would always like to give Ghanaians a different perspective altogether. Everybody goes in a certain direction, and I also have my own perspective of the whole affair.
Mm.
And from where I sit, if we have set rules for a nation, for a whole institution, as to the time frame with which they are to declare certain results, you know, that time frame is what we should be looking at, but not the pace at which it was announced. Insofar as the electoral commissioner was within the time frame that was given. And mind you, to put this out there, I have been a presiding officer for the electoral commission on 2 consecutive elections in 2012. I have been a polling official for the Electoral Commission in 2008. I know how the processes work. I know how it is. At the constituency center, when you declare elections, those at the local level, everybody knows what the figures are. Every party has a representative on the ground. They know the figures. Every media house has a representative. International observers, they all have the figures at the ground level where it was announced. So when we are waiting up to the Electoral Commission, insofar as the Electoral Commissioner did not go outside of the general time frame that was given, nobody should kind of be expecting that it should have come earlier or not.
Do you
Yeah.
believe in the figures that are being churned out by the EC?
Well, for the figures, nobody can say they believe in it until we have some kind of assessment of why these new figures are coming in. And that even gives room for people to revisit the old figures that was used in declaring the election. People would want to revisit it to have a whole look at the whole thing altogether again, which is very okay. It's within everybody's right to have a relook. It is within everybody's right to take it to the next level. So one cannot say we believe it or we do not believe it until we take steps to have it ascertained, and then we know if indeed it is what it is supposed to be. Yeah.
Well
It's
said.
not a good sign. Yeah. One must admit it's not a good sign.
All right, Dr. Khalid, let me bring you in here.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a bit worrying that at our age and what we've gotten to, and 2020, having run elections for years, we'll be back to issues,
Where we are.
human errors, issues of negligence, if we can put it that way, and issues of not paying attention to details, especially when you know the stakes are high and we also want to grow politically. But again, your assessment of the EC's performance and the media, the way the issues were handled, different figures from the political parties, media had their own figures, and then the EC itself having to change
My
herself.
point.
What's your
If you
take?
look at it, if you look at it, it looks like the media trusted one political party that was actually churning out the figures to them, as opposed to the other. And in a race or in a two-horse race, when that begins to happen, then you tend to, is the state really taking sides or institutions? But I'll tell you, I'll take you through a background of things that really makes me worry as a Ghanaian and looking at institutional function, right? You have the head of no mean an institution, such as the National Communication Authority, with access to national security information. And by national security information, I'm talking about personal data of citizens in relation to communications, names, and what have you. And this is very vital data, manning a coalition center of the government or the incumbent party. That raises a big red flag. And I think that everyone seems to be glossing over that. And if we're doing that, it means that we're not drawing lines between what state institutions are, what individuals are, and what their functions are. And I felt that that was a blatant disregard and abuse of incumbency, regardless of whatever it meant, whether he did. I'm not trying to accuse him that he's done something wrong, but given the functionality of the office and the access to information they have, if anyone begins to look at it from that perspective, or any investor, you would have concerns as to what the country actually means when it talks about accountability, rule of law, separation of powers, and the likes of that. Now, put that aside. you come to the Electoral Commission, right, that has a mandate to perform these duties. I mean, within the old system that we've always had, there is even clarity and transparency in how electoral results are churned out. But this time around, nobody knew where they were coming from. Even the media houses, you would actually admit to yourselves, where were you getting the figures?
I mean,
should be.
they were picking the results from the polling centers and then also the tabulation centers.
Yes, but that was quite a hectic job for you, because it was sometimes
That's how it's always been done. We always
no, but the point is, there are times that you say, okay, our sources in the EC needs to verify this. We're not too sure, but from the information we have here, this is what we're having. From another insider story, I mean, I was hearing this from a lot of media houses, and I felt that, what's happening? What has this process given us for us to be having insider sources when the EC ought to be the only source churning out that information? So watching the media, I don't know if it was the style of reporting or what it was, I had that feel. And it's the last thing you'd want to have, given sort of like a closely contested election such as what we had. And if the credibility of that, because the last thing as an electoral commission to do is to cast doubts in an election. And I think if it comes to that, the EC have failed woefully.
Not to defend the media, but again, the media.
I'm not accusing the media. This
Yes,
is
of
just
course, the media. Just some clarity based on what you said. The media has always said, and I think we know that the duty to declare results in our land is the duty of the Electoral Commission. And so what the media can only do is to project and then put out figures that they have
which is acceptable.
And so if anybody in the media comes out to say that, okay, we are waiting for verification from the EC, I think it's in the right direction, because it is not your duty to call the election. You can only project.
No, what I'm just saying is, it's done all over the world. The media project election based on whatever is coming in, right? My point is, when you begin to hear words like my inside source here, my source there, do you get what I mean? Then again, I've made a classic example of how a state institutional setup such as the NCA with vital access to information. How many media houses flag this? But this is a very important issue, unless, of course, you disagree with me. Right. That, how many media houses? So a lot more could have happened. But so it means that if a scrutiny of the electoral process has started beforehand, would have had all these discussions. And that is where you have a voice that I don't have, except for academic papers, which nobody barely reads.
Anyway, John, prior to the elections, you had so much confidence in the Electoral Commission. Do you think, from what has happened, the Electoral Commission has been very diligent in the execution, and then also the role the media played, was it well played?
Well, Sandra, this is the thing. As I said in that discussion, when it comes to the Electoral Commission, the proof is in the pudding. The end justifies the means. And if you look at the kind of palpable tensions that we are witnessing now in the country, I'm not going to place all the blame on the Electoral Commission, because I do think, in fact, that the media could have done better. The Electoral Commission could have done better. The NDC could have done better. And of course, the MPP could have done better. For the Electoral Commission, I have already indicated that when the various media houses and political parties were holding press conferences and counter press conferences and announcing results, the Electoral Commission had an obligation to take control of the situation through their website and gradually update the nation and put everybody on the same page on what was going on. They didn't do that and allow the MPP to take their people to a different page, the NDC to take their people to a different page. And those of us who were tuned into the media houses also got divided, because the media houses, in fact, did not even have consistent numbers among them. The NDC, though, has seen what happened in 2012 when Nana Akufo-Addo delayed in accepting the results of the elections. MPP supporters besieged the Electoral Commission's premises. Some people's cars or windows of their cars were smashed in Accra. Journalists were beaten at Nana Akufo-Addo's house. They should have seen that, in fact, we do not have matured voters in terms of and I'm not trying to be condescending towards the Ghanaian voter. We do not. People can descend into violence, and it's not like we're animals. But the nature in which we compete for elections in Africa is a do and die affair. There is a winner take all or a zero sum game that is that places a lot of burden on everybody and makes losing elections very costly. And so I expected the NDC to start every press conference when they disagreed with the Electoral Commission with, please be calm, do not take to the streets, do not resort to violence, but we are not accepting the results, and we're doing everything possible to bring it to the limelight. They didn't do that. The comments were, take to the streets, besiege the Electoral Commission's premises, and make sure you stop them from changing the results. How are they going to do that? And I think that's where the NDC failed.
Right.
For the NPP, we had a lot of NPP supporters also, in fact, marching through the streets and celebrating, and in some few cases, they clashed. The parties, in the parties' press conferences, they did not call on these people to go back home and just wait for the Electoral Commission. And so they also failed. And so for me, we have to distribute blame across all the parties involved and try to do better next time.
We've not had violence-free elections this year across Africa, and so Ghana was the last hope for the continent, and here we are again. What does this speak about Africa in general?
What it means, in fact, two things. One is it's indicative of our fundamental lack of our electoral and even judicial institutions, the basic institutions that man these processes, and also an indication that the winner-take-all system of governance that we have is not serving the post-colonial political organizations or territorial organizations of countries that we had. And I'll start with the lack of trust in institutions. When you look at Ghana's elections since 1992, we have never had a situation when the incumbent party lost elections, they refused to accept results. But we've always had the situation where when the opposition lost elections, they dragged their feet before accepting results. What it indicates is that these opposition parties know that the independent or so-called independent electoral and judicial institutions that we have to uphold the integrity of our electoral processes are indeed susceptible to executive capture and manipulation. They themselves have governed before. They know that you can indeed use state apparatus to capture these independent institutions and manipulate them to turn things into your favor. And so there is a lack of trust in the institutions when you are not in government.
Right.
The second problem, as I mentioned, is how the winner-take-all system is not serving the inter-ethnic conglomeration of countries that we have. In fact, let's face it, the political party formulations that we have across Africa have ethnic origins. After colonialism and when the colonial masters left, most political parties originated from ethnic origins where people vied for power based on which ethnicity you came from. And what it means is that when one party wins, it automatically means some sort of advantage for one ethnicity over the other. And especially because we have a winner-take-all system, the minority ethnic ethnicities always feel left out and sometimes tend to resort to violence. And even if you're not a minority party, but you end up losing, you always feel like the voices of the people in your ethnicity are not going to represent it. The other reason why the winner-take-all system is not serving Africa is it makes losing elections very costly. These political parties spend hundreds of millions of dollars traversing the topology of these countries, visiting every corner of the country, making promises and giving people hope. And then all of a sudden, in a matter of 24 hours or say up to 72 hours, you're told that all that investment is gone to naught because you didn't win, and you're not going to have a share in the governance of the country for the next 4 years. It makes accepting defeat very difficult for the opposition parties, but also makes the incumbent mindful of the cost of losing elections. And so when they are in government, they do everything they can to make sure they don't lose elections, even if that means bribing the so-called independent electoral institutions or using the state apparatus, the military, the police service, and the judiciary to suppress the will of the people.
Mm.
And so if we want, as a continent, to have a country where everybody is represented, every view and voice is represented, we need to, as a matter of urgency, transition away from the winner-take-all systems of governance.
So I want to just give you 1 minute each to really wrap this up for us. First of all, let me start with you, Dr. Khalid. I want to find out from you, what's the way forward? Election dispute, election crisis. Should the NDC just concede and we move on, or what should we do to move on as a nation? Quickly.
The NDC has compelling evidence. I think that they should use the right channels, right, to address these issues. Governance is a continuum. We're building institutions day by day. So moving forward, we could, some merit came out of the election petition 2012. Some merit will come out of this. That's if they have compelling evidence. So if they have it, they should use the right channels to address it.
Okay. And John, same question to you. We can't afford to go back to where we are clearly running away from. We want to grow as a nation politically. Should the NDC just concede defeat and we move on with our lives?
Well, it is not for me to say to the NDC to concede without actually reviewing the evidence that they have. I think that there's been enough reason so far for the NDC to have some amount of distrust for the Electoral Commission, because they keep changing their figures, and the NDC is worried about that. And let's be clear, it is not only the NDC that is saying they will go to court to contest some elections, some of the constituencies. The MPP actually also signed some of the constituencies in protest, saying they will go to court to contest those results. And so clearly, the Electoral Commission has work on its hand. It has work to do in terms of running elections that will be satisfactory to both parties.
Okay.
I think what the NDC needs to be doing, however, is given that some of its supporters are marching through the streets and burning tires, it is creating a lot of palpable tensions across the country. And so for every press conference that they would hold going forward, they should start by calming those tensions.
Okay, Richard, your final word. It's looking good for you. You are jubilating because it's gone your way. You've been there before, because sometime back your cattle had to.
We actually
find out from you if you think the NDC should just stop wasting our time.
To be very honest with you, this election NDC did very well. It was an impressive turnout, because prior to this election, there are rumors flying around that when a credible voter register is put together, the NDC can never win an election in Ghana. So there is an appointment of a new electoral commissioner. There is a new voter register compiled, and everything looks afresh. So now NDC is crossing over 6 million votes. That is a lot. So the MPP should sit down, wake up, and be highly, highly, highly conscious that voters really look at so many things in deciding. And NDC is a power, is a force that must be reckoned with. Then going forward, the NDC also should learn from the NPP in 2012, just like everybody's saying. Just that political parties should be very mindful of their posture and their utterances. In 2012, the MPP took that step, and they were told that any idiot, excuse my language, can go to court. You see, the situation now is playing the face of the NDC.
Okay, unfortunately,
mind the utterances.
Okay, so gentlemen, thanks so much. I want to thank you for this insightful conversation. I was joined by Dr. Sheriff Khalid, who is an assistant professor, accounting and finance management with the University of Sheffield in the UK. Also, John Taden is political economist from University of Texas, Dallas in the US here. And I was joined all the way from South Korea. Richard Zinleri is a Ghanaian businessman based in South Korea, and it's been an insightful discussion. I want to thank you all for this conversation. But on the second part of the conversation, we'll be looking at the second term of Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. What are the economic and business prospects of his second term? Ghana's rising debt stock. How is it going to deal with it? Issues with free SHS. Where is the funding going to come from? That will be the second part of our conversation. Thanks so much for watching, and see you next week for that interesting conversation. And remember to like my YouTube channel, CTV, and also subscribe as well. Like the videos you see there. My name is Sandra S, and I'm up in the